through all of that, I always noticed that the applications that were just poor were always poor in the same way, regardless of which position it was that was being hired. And good ones were generally good in the same way. And more recently, I'd also looked at, I suppose in the maybe last year or so, I've looked at about 200 or a few more CVs and cover letters for applications for data analyst positions. And again, I just saw the same pattern. So I thought, well, I'll use this opportunity to try and at least give my experience of what makes good applications for jobs and what makes poor ones. Right, so a little, just some other stuff about me. Apart from my working life, I've got a few hobbies that are also all related to data, mostly. So I created and maintain a resource called the Big Book of R, which is about 250 mostly free R programming books, so you should definitely check that out. I wrote a book called Project Management Fundamentals for data analysts that you can find at that link. And I tweet quite often at, my handle is Oscar Baruffa, and I blog about data careers in R. And then I've also got a newsletter, which is probably the best place to just get up, hear updates about when I release new like books, products, blog posts, or giving talks like this one. And all these slides with all the links will be, there'll be a link at the end of the presentation, and you'll also be receiving this whole deck of slides after the presentation as well. Alrighty, so what we'll be covering is I'm going to be talking a little bit about the hiring process. I'll be covering 3 types of CVs that I think you should have in your arsenal, being a generic one, a semi-tailored one, and then a really highly tailored CV. And also I will note, like I use the terminology of CV. I know in other places, like I think especially in the US, you use resume, but I mean, I'm using these interchangeably. I'll touch on cover letters as well. Then I'm also want to briefly talk about when you're applying, like how it feels when, I can see how it often feels like how you stack up against other applicants, and you might feel like you're not super qualified, right? Because you don't have the longest list of certifications, but we'll touch on that in a moment. And also what I think is super important is how do you manage your energy and therefore also emotional state when you're job hunting. I find job hunting to be extremely stressful, and maybe a little bit of how I handle it might help you as well. And then we've got a few goodies for you at the end. Alrighty, so some caveats are that this isn't research driven. This is based on my own experience. There will be local job markets and cultural factors that you need to take into account. And you will definitely also have your own preferred approach based on your personality, your character, and your experiences. And you will definitely hear contradictory advice. There's things I'm going to be telling you now that in other places you'll read you should never do. It's really hard to say that there's a perfect way to do it. I think pick what resonates with you and see what works and what doesn't. Alrighty, so of course you might, as we mentioned, you might have some questions, and we'll answer those at the end. Alrighty, so let's talk about the hiring process. So when you're looking for jobs, you may have experienced some of these, right? You apply for, you see there's a perfect job, you apply for it, and you don't even get a rejection. I mean, sometimes it's quite lucky just to even get turned down. You might be thinking, how many must you apply to? I've seen some people saying they apply to 10s, 20, 30, hundreds of jobs and still don't get anywhere. There's often, you might feel like, wow, the requirements are absolutely crazy. You see this list of job requirements and it really looks like they want to hire a whole team, not just one person. And I think the other really scary one sometimes is when you're trying to look for jobs and you think, wow, I'm just unemployable, right? There's no way I can find work. And all these thoughts and feelings, I can tell you that I have had all of them. And guaranteed, even in my next role that I'm looking for, some of these things are going to pop up again. Why that is exactly, I don't know, but you can just, it's totally normal and natural to have these things happening, and it's not unique to you. But hopefully some of what I'll be showing you today is going to help overcome some of these things. Righty. we should maybe start, before we look into looking for jobs and how you can apply for them, the facts, which need to establish some like baseline. The baseline, or the facts, as I said, is that companies need work. Companies have work that needs to be done, and they need people to do that work. And you have some skills and experience that you can offer just by, I mean, if you can read and write and use a computer, I mean, at the very basics, you've got something to offer, right? So it's very hard always to feel like you've got a lot of skills and knowledge because you're in your own head, but you definitely do. I'll bet good money that we can uncover for anyone what your skills and experience are. Even if you're a new grad, if you've got zero work experience, that's you've got a lot to offer. And how does as I sort of think of it, the job ad to the first day of someone starting pipeline look like? The core of it is really that from the company side, a job profile is scoped. The ad is created and published. Then there's a period of screening all the CVs and applications and creating a shortlist. Then from that shortlist, organizing interview rounds and maybe a take-home or on-premise assignments of some kind. Then there's a process of negotiating an offer and then actually starting. And what we'll be discussing today is just this point, the screening CVs and creating a shortlist. So, I'll answer the question now. The reason really is because this is where I think you've got the most influence that is probably yet untapped. So what are some of the problems in the hiring processes? From what we've seen before, you get these crazy requirements. It feels like you're not getting the job. Companies are getting lots of terrible applications, I can tell you. On the company side, there's issues that the job has been poorly scoped. They don't actually know what they want. The ad is too generic. It reads just like it was taken off of any other company's site, and they just scratched the name out and put a different company name and said, we are also hiring for this role. And of course, every single company's unique needs are going to be quite different depending on the setup, the technology they use, their data maturity, what other projects are going on, their skills in the team. I mean, these are all unique in every single point. And very often a job has way too many requirements. Way too many people have had input into what this role should cover, and then everything becomes a priority and you can't really surface what it is that the role at its core really needs. On your side as an applicant, I think the number one issue is that your CV and cover letter, if there is one, are just too generic. And that's just something I've seen over and over. And then this is why we'll be covering that which you can do to alleviate this issue. All right, I'll just remember to take a sip of water now and again. I tend to forget that. All right, so you're all with me. So there's many people involved in the hiring process. Depending on the company, you might have an applicant tracking system, which is like an automated system to help sift through some of the applications. There'll be a recruiter involved, either internal or external or both. There's a hiring manager, the person who's actually hiring for the role, the person that will be usually working with the person on a daily basis or managing them. Usually there's also at least one other colleague involved to provide a sounding board and just spread the workload a little bit and also take part in interviews. Usually there's someone also at a higher level, like a technical lead or some other director who's also going to be involved and usually also has some sort of say. It depends on the size of the company, of course, as well. And then there's also an HR manager. So they're responsible for making sure that the whole process is running smoothly and according to company policy. Now, all of these systems and people are not perfect, right? You might get the applicant tracking system might be terrible. Maybe the recruiter is feeling sad on the day that your CV just hits their desk. Maybe the tech lead is very overworked on the day you meant to have a sort of final interview with him. You really don't know. There's so many variables here that's very difficult to control for. But why I'm mentioning this is because I think it's worth understanding that it's very rare that there's going to be this perfect flow of all the procedures and all the objectivity of everyone involved looking at your CV. And what we'll be getting to is that you need to just keep in mind that whoever's looking at your application may not have their full attention or even be able to apply their full energy into trying to uncover whether you are a good match for this role or not. And so it's your job to make that identifying that you are a match as easy as possible. So let's get into how your CV can actually do this. So something else to realize is, who you are as a person. You've got multiple aspects to you. Maybe you're pleasant to work with, you're really good at Googling solutions, you're not scared by coding errors, you've got a bit of a knack for data viz, you're persistent, or even just that you are able to finish projects. These are all excellent qualities, right? But what do the people hiring you see? At the first crucial point is they can only see what it is that your CV tells them. That's it. There's nothing really else for them to work off of. And it's, again, for me, just stressing the importance of what it is your CV is trying to do. So what is it that your CV is trying to do? Your CV might be one in hundreds, right? That lands on the desk. I mean, for me in the last 2 applications, I mean, it's not unusual to get like 150 CVs that need to be sorted through. And the job of your CV is to get you from this big pack into the shortlist being probably 5, 6, maybe 10. And how does what's the best chance of that happening is for the people who are looking at it to do the least amount of mental effort to identify that you are a match for the role. So the message here is to make that match as obvious as possible. And I say, and I added here, don't punish the hiring manager who's trying to look at whether or not you are going to be the next colleague that joins the team. And why I say that is quite strong words, but sometimes it really feels like, on my side, I'm looking at it, feels like I'm being punished. Like, I'm looking, this is my 70th, 80th CV, and I see this application, and I'm like, I just can't grasp or gather or dig if this person is a match at all. It's like there's been no effort made to show how it is that this person is going to meet the requirements of this role. Maybe the person would be a perfect match, but the amount of work and effort I'd need to do to actually go and see that that is the case is just way beyond what I can expend when I've still got another 80 applications to get through. So that's where you don't want to give that impression that, wow, dear hiring manager, the very first interaction we have is I'm really going to make you work hard to figure out, if I'm going to be a match or not. And I would also add that, in my experience, let's say a good CV, and we'll get to soon what makes good CVs. It's not that a good CV is competing against 100 other good CVs. Certainly not. There's maybe 6 or so out of 100 that are good. So if you are a good match, I think you are only competing against a handful of other good matches. Of course, this is just in my experience, right? It might be quite different. I haven't worked in very large companies, but there's many more smaller companies than there are large companies. So that's a key message, right? You don't want to punish a hiring manager the very first interaction you have with them. But what does this mean? I think, and this is an approach I've used myself that I'll show you now. You need 3 types of CVs. You've got your generic CV, you've got a semi-tailored CV, and then all CVs, multiple versions of them, and then highly tailored CVs. Let's get into each of these. So the generic CV is the one which most likely most of you are using at the moment. When I say generic, it means there's little to no customization done for any role. It's just like basically a list of all your history of what you've done, and that is what you use for every single job application. Now, many people do land jobs with these, and many people will still. So I'm not saying that it doesn't work. I'm just saying it's not I don't think it's stacking the cards in your favor to only have this one type of CV, but it is worth having it because it does have its place in the scope of different CVs that you use. So yeah, so it doesn't cater to a specific role at all. However, the pro of that is it saves your time and energy, right? You can use it really easily to just apply for many jobs. It's that's what it comes with, and that's where it has its place. And just as a side note, what I did find when I was doing a search for this talk, this site just had really what I thought were perfectly acceptable, in some cases really good templates to use. So if you really don't know what else to use one of these. I think they're pretty good. Anyway, so that's a generic CV. I think you, without whether you know it or not, most of you have been using this one. Then you get semi-tailored CVs. So these are ones that are different versions of your CV or resume that are tailored towards different types of jobs. And although it might not be for a specific role, it's still tailored to a type of role, right? So what's great here is that it's already much better aligned to and able to show the match to a job. And the cons are almost none. I mean, you need to put a little bit of investment into creating them. But I think in the most cases, and I've certainly found, semi-tailored CVs actually do most of the lifting for most job applications that you do. And even having a semi-tailored CV will already raise your profile, let's say, in the whole stack of generic CVs. So let me show you a little bit like what this might look like. So let's say you've got your generic CV, right? And I'm just, I won't go into detail too much, but let's say it mentions just everything that you do, right? But doesn't cover any of the elements in depth of what you do or what skills you have. So let's say, for example, it mentions some tools that you use, it mentions some projects that you worked on, or let's say if you just, if you don't have any working experience, but you've studied or done certifications, you mentioned the type of projects, capstones that you worked on. But that's it, right? It's sort of like that overall listing that we talked. But when you're looking for work, if you found, for example, most jobs fall into I suppose more than one, but even if it was 1, 2, or 3 categories, 3 main buckets, then I would go and create versions of your CV that are optimized towards those types of roles. So let's say, for example, you found that you really like jobs that talk about marketing analysis, or on the other side, jobs that talk a lot about automating systems in some way. Then the one CV would try and highlight and use the language that those jobs use. They'll talk about churn, customer acquisition, sales attribution, click-through rates, whatever the case may be. And then on the automation side, you might talk a lot more about things like scraping websites, automated reporting, continuous integration, GitHub Actions, whatever it may be, right? So you can go a little bit more into detail in those types of roles and show what it is you know or care about or even are interested in. And you know, when you're given a 1 or 2 page max of what a CV can contain, even just because that's the most like a hiring manager can absorb when they're looking at tens or hundreds of these, then at least you're being able to delve much more into those topics. And just as an example, when I was looking for work a while ago, I was in South Africa, but I was also looking for work that was either in Europe or in the UK. And wherever I had like monetary values of things listed in my CV, I would then also convert it both into British pounds and into euros. So I had, not only did I have my 2 CVs of the types of roles, I also had for each of the currency types that I was aiming for, because again, my approach was not to make the hiring manager have to do more mental maths to understand whether these South African rands, like the number that I'm saying, is it significant or not? It might not mean anything to them, this other currency. So I do that work for them. And then that's kind of the whole approach. Right, so that's a semi-tailored CV. And then you get the highly tailored CV. So this is one where you really go into a lot of efforts to make to customize your CV as much to the role as possible. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like in a moment. So this has got the best chance of surfacing and showing to the hiring manager how it is that you match the role. And I'll be very clear that it doesn't necessarily mean that you are 100% match for the role. It's just that how it is you are a match for the role. Every candidate has a shortcoming somewhere. And from the hiring, I'll diverge a little bit here. From the hiring perspective, a lot of the hiring process is about minimizing the risk of making a bad hire. And making a bad hire is where you are dealing with, your risk comes in, what are the unknowns? But even if, it's better to know what the shortcomings of a candidate are, because if then as a hiring manager you say, okay, well, we can make up for these lack of skills in this person by either not giving them some of the work we thought we would give them, someone else would take it over, maybe we can give them training. Just understanding what those shortcomings are already lowers the risk significantly, because as a hiring manager, I can make a plan for how we will mitigate those. So you're trying to show how it is that you're a match in the best possible way. The con is this is super time consuming and very energy intensive. Of course, the more research you put into it, it's just energy intensive and not, getting rejections or not even hearing back. These take a little bit more of a emotional blow. But let's have a look at a highly tailored CV. So this was actually the job description for the job that I now have. And how I went through it is, this will just be a bit of an example. I extracted it. There was this whole list of what the job requires and what the role will be doing. And so these where I've made it bold is my addition later. So what I did is I picked out all the keywords or aspects that I felt I either had experience in, some knowledge of, or something to say, like some aspect of how I would approach it if I was in that role. And you'll see where I added these, right? And then in these lower bits, I didn't highlight anything because I didn't know anything about the methodology that we're using, about management information systems, no idea, and nothing about these specific type of analyses, right? Then how did my CV look? I took this role and I used their language and tried to highlight, again, here I'm just emboldening this for you, but I tried to match as much as I could what they were saying to show that I have done this, or I have some sort of approach to it or experience. So you'll see that I've done a couple of these, and you can look at this more in detail when you get the slides later. And just as the opposing example, if I show you the sustainability engineer role, now that's a role I did for 4 years, very intensively, and I was very good at it, and I had a lot of responsibility there, but I hardly said anything about it for this because there was nothing there that I could say that would be more relevant than what I had already said at the top. And so I just gave it a few, bullet points. However, if I had looked for sustainability work, I may have switched this around. I may have given, if there was another role, I may have said very little about the current role I was doing at the time and spoken a lot more about all of my sustainability related knowledge as a sustainability engineer. So I've touched on this a little bit, but just to maybe recap. So I had just before this role, kind of a couple of CVs. I had my very generic sustainability and data one. Sort of wasn't very strong on either, but was more kind of an overall collection of all of my expertise and experience up to that point, but of course couldn't go very much into detail in either one. Then I had a CV that was very much a data focus and another one that was way more sustainability focus. And the two look quite different from each other. And then I also had a few role specific ones. And the one that I got in this current role was one of the role specific ones. I think, I think your semi-tailored CVs are probably going to do most of the work for you. Especially if you're working full-time in that already, it's quite difficult to make a lot of these custom CVs. Cover letters. Cover letters are a little bit more, I don't know. I'd say I get a lot more mixed messages out there about whether cover letters are important or not, or No, I'd say there's enough debate out there that it's inconclusive. I think cover letters are really important. It's a way to just bring that added level of um, uh, how would I put it? Like the human side to, you know, how it is you work and feel and how you communicate succinctly and what it is you understand about the role, I suppose, most importantly. So just as an example of cover letters that I've seen that are really good, like, or the spectrum is those that are too short, like just a few sentences, are they're just yeah, they're not great. The opposite side is also, you know, if not fantastic, if you've got a whole wall of text, like a whole page or 2 pages of life history and how you feel about all sorts of subjects, and you know that don't really have much to do with the task at hand. That's also not great either, because it's you get the feeling like this person can't get the points across really well. Just about right is 400 to 600 words, I would say. And you hit all of the keywords of the role in the second or third sentence in that. So for example, let's say the job was asking for R experience, SQL experience, some domain expertise, and somewhere you read about data quality and thought, that's something I can talk about. Then you might just have your very generic intro line, you know, I'm very excited to apply for this position. And then I would, in the very next sentence, start hitting some of those keywords, right? Because a manager's scanning, he's scanning through, or she's scanning through 60, 70, 80 of these, and they're scanning for these keywords. And you want to see, okay, I've been using R for this, and how long I've done it for. I've got some basic knowledge of SQL. Enjoy the process of spotting data quality. So the idea is just to show, like, really upfront, make sure that you've, even if you just show you have read the job description, I mean, that's going to put you in the top 20% of applicants right away. Alrighty. And again, just a little bit more into it, I'll just show like the cover letter. So this was the same description from earlier. Then in my cover letter, I again just pulled out their keywords and used them again, and showing where it is that I've got this same experience. So you'll see value chains, I used value chains. They used strategic insights. I think I used some here that I've done strategic work, recommending strategies. I won't go through all of it here. You can look at it more in detail later. But I think you get the idea, right? That it's just repeating that message that I've read this, I understand it, and I really think I'm a very good match for these reasons. You're backing it up with evidence, right? Which ironically is kind of the whole the whole point of doing data analysis work, right? Is making data-informed decisions. Well, this is qualitative data that you can use as your evidence. Just as an example, they didn't say anything in the job specifically about this being a non-profit organization, but it was a non-profit organization. So I used that to my advantage in that I have worked at non-profit organizations before. And so I added that in. All right, I've got about 5 minutes left on my 35 minutes self-imposed time limit. So I do want to answer as many questions as possible. So yeah, I think it's quite important to touch on you versus like the qualified ones, right? And it's super easy, especially when you know, a lot of data analytical work is general, like tech work, and you know, people are very online, and so you know a lot of what's happening with others, and you know the work that other people are doing. And I think it's really, really easy to feel like, wow, everyone else is way more qualified than me. And so let's touch on that. So I think a key one, I mean, even me, I've got 15 years of experience, and I sometimes feel like, wow, I've got no experience. I need to totally reskill in order to do X, Y, Z. It just happens, right? But I think especially, as I understand, a lot of people joining today will have no experience in that they're very new or very early in their careers. And you think, well, I have no experience. How can I apply for this role? My view is that you do not have to have the most experience, like the most CV, in order to have a good CV, right? That means you don't need the most experience, the skills, the most languages that you know, the most keywords in there. But what helps way more is being very specific in your skills, your experience, what it is you do know. that is for me what always shows, wow, this person is going to be a great fit, not only because of what skills they do have, but because they know how to articulate what matters to us. And what matters to us is what we put in the job ad. So here's an example. Maybe you'll see something that says the requirements is sharing results with internal stakeholders. Another candidate might have a list of certifications as long as they are, right? They'll say they're, they're Azure certified, they're a Python core developer, who knows what, right? Huge list. But me looking at that still doesn't tell me, do they know how to share results? Like we said, this is a priority for us, right? Then I would say in like what I'd be looking for is, let's say if someone said, oh, I've worked in R Markdown, I know how to use Word. I've developed an internal wiki at my previous role. I've incorporated feedback into the design of the next report that I'm making. I've briefed non-technical managers on the limitations of the study. These are, to me, way more important than just having a lot of certifications. Not to say having them isn't important or useful, but I think if you do have them, don't rely just on that list to get you hired. And if you don't have all of them, you use what you do have, right? Don't count your experience. Don't discount the experience that you do already have. So if there's some things that I want you to just remember at this point is that there aren't absolutely perfect candidates, right? There are candidates who are really good, who we know the shortcomings of, and those shortcomings, we have some plan of being able to deal with them. That is really mostly the best that's and practical that can be hoped for. And then the one last point is just about managing your energy. So I've talked about now this generic, semi-tailored and tailored CVs, highly tailored. And the amount of effort you need in this very rough data will show that you need increasing amounts of energy as you go up in the scale. Where I would suggest that where like the job ad is very generic, where your motivation to get it is very low, I would just then use a generic CV and not put much more thought into it, right? There's no real match, or but you want to have a shot at it, then do that. Where there is a pretty good match, I would at least use the semi-tailored CV, and I would advise, like in most places, you probably want to use that most of the time. And then where you really, really need or want the job, or you feel like you've got a really good way of showing it how it is you have a match, then go for the highly tailored CV. It's really like understanding that there's a spectrum that is, you've already got half the battle won, and you can try and manage your energy and expectations accordingly. All right, so we're now really almost at the end. Before I just get to a few goodies and takeaways for you. You are definitely employable. A better match to the role is more important than having the most skills or the most experience of compared to other candidates. Please don't punish the hiring manager. Make the job as easy as possible to see how it is that you're a match. You can do this by being very specific about what your roles and experience are compared to the jobs that you're applying for. And it takes energy to be specific, so just do so smartly. Alrighty, yeah. Next time you're applying for a job, just remember this mantra: be specific. So quickly, some swag for you. Yeah, I see some great questions coming through. We can answer them. So you can get some resume examples. I've also wrote a couple of blog posts that formed kind of the basis of much of this talk. And I've also, there's a bit of a hidden page on my website. If you go to /jobs, I had a look at reviewing job ads that I saw on LinkedIn and just trying to decipher what it is that they want and sort of giving a bit of a rating. I did about 10 or 13 of them. It was quite fun. So you can have a look at if you want a bit more of, if you're not sick of my voice just yet. This book is one of the best books on a career in data science. They talk about the broad umbrella of data science that I've come across. If you go to bestbook.cool, it redirects to the Manning site, And I think that comes with anywhere between a 20 to 40% discounts. That's really good. And there's an excellent accompanying podcast that's for free. I really, if you don't have access to seniors or mentors or whatever, this is a fantastic resource. You should definitely check it out. If you want, you can also have a look, if you're already running projects or just want to understand a little bit about project management fundamentals for data analysts, you can have a look at that book that I wrote. And yeah, so we are then at the end and answer questions. I'm glad I kept more or less in time. And I've got some starter questions here, but I see there's also quite a lot of questions coming through.
Yeah, so Oscar, I think if you if you filter the questions instead of by most recent, do it by most upvotes. That way we'll get the most relevant questions first, and then.
Okay, so by most upvotes, cool. Okay, 24 questions. We'll see if we get to all of these. Interesting. Okay. Right, so I think you can all see my face now. All right, so first question is from Stacy. Many employers post entry-level data analyst positions with language like expert, advanced. Yeah. Can this be accurate? What's considered good enough? Yeah, good question. I think, I think they're often a bit delusional, to be honest. We've taken the approach where we going much more the language of saying we don't expect you to be an expert here, just show potential in this way. We learn on the job. We've got all these things. I do think, people expect too much. It's not you, it's definitely them. What's considered good enough for SQL, that's very role specific. So it's hard to say, but I think if you know how to query a database at the very basic level, it's probably good enough for most roles. Sorry, I can't be more specific there, but if you're thinking if you're crazy or them, it's them that are crazy. All right, how difficult is it for a data analyst junior to find a job? I took a boot camp that lasted a couple of months. Some advice. Yeah, I'd say the advice being mostly what I've covered so far. How difficult? I can tell you from my experience at the moment, it's more difficult to find people than it is, than it's been for a while. But even when I say difficult, I mean, we've had it almost where, you get 100 CVs and you repost a job because none of them matched, then in the second round, we got it. So I think if it's difficult, my gut feels is still you're not stacking the cards in your favor because you haven't been specific enough. And also, as I mentioned, I mean, you've got all these variables that you just can't control for within the company. It can always happen that you just get unlucky and keep hitting these over and over. Next one. Would you suggest cover letters for individuals trying to pivot careers? Yeah. Do you believe this might be helpful for someone who's got in the education but not done a ton of those tasks? Yeah, definitely. I think even probably your cover letters is an excellent way to, let's say, make up for what you might lack in your exact experience. I mean, I would still try and highlight whatever data type of work you could do. But remember, data work, which is, I suppose, if you haven't done the role before, it's a bit hard to know that the technical skills is just one element. It's like half of it, or maybe even less. Like talking to stakeholders, gathering requirements, changing systems, understanding where information comes from and how that is affected at a high level. These are all very valuable skills that unfortunately don't always make it through to the job description. But these are elements that any work experience really does help us. So yeah, I'd say definitely I'll definitely add a cover letter. Okay, these are all right. So the next one was, any advice on a portfolio? Do you think it helps? Which topics should you use? Yeah, this is I think when you're very new to very early in your career, a portfolio does help. I must say, almost no applications that I've seen, at least in Europe, have them. But I was seeing a bit of a Twitter thread a while ago where it seems the experience, at least in the US, is quite different. Lots of people do have them. But I say, yeah, early in your career, it does help. And I would, again, I mean, I must say I've not put one together myself. I sort of entered a bit late in my career where having a portfolio wouldn't really have made a difference. The topics, I would say a little bit like if you see there's jobs that you're trying to, much like having the semi-tailored CVs, try and pick topics that sort of fit that a little bit. So, it's got some kind of relevance, or at least, if nothing else, something for you to talk about when you get to an interview. Next one. Are Kaggle competitions of any resume value? It's very hard for me to say. I think Kaggle is mostly got to do on the data scientist side, or let's say machine learning engineer. I've not hired for those. So I can't say it's never of value. If I was hiring for like a machine learning engineer early stage, perhaps. Again, I think it's that sort of thing, like much early in your career. If you don't have something else, some other experience to lean on, then things like portfolios, Kaggle competitions help in the sense that at least it's something to talk about, although notwithstanding the actual experience you gain from doing it, right? I'd almost say that that's maybe best if you approach it from that angle first, is to actually gain some experience. Then you will maybe realize the best return on your time for actually doing that type of work. There is a trend now to ask for salary range to avoid applying for jobs that don't match your expectations. Is it a good idea? Or how to approach it? I think it depends how desperate you are. I think it's totally fine and to ask for a salary range. Personally, I really don't like it when jobs don't give salary ranges. I think it's a big waste of everyone's time without those. I'm a huge proponent of doing that, and yeah. So I think if you, again, for me, it comes down to that idea of managing your energy, right? If you know that if you think, well, I've only got it in me to apply for, 10 jobs this month or this week or whatever, you do want to have some filter. And I think it's totally okay to pass up jobs that don't have a salary range, because yeah, you might go through the whole thing and then it's just too low. I think that's totally fine. I do that. Would do that as well. Okay, so how do you semi-tailor your CV when you try to pivot to an industry from education and research to analysis? You're tailoring it based on, maybe your tailoring will be quite limited, but I think, all your experience that you've got, you're trying to frame it in different ways. And you're trying to frame it towards, I would say, your area of interest. So if you're tailoring the CV because, let's say, for example, from research to an analysis to entertainment or product analysis, yeah. So you sort of try and imagine as much as you can by looking at the jobs. And I would say maybe look at a lot of job ads of each of those and then think, okay, well, if I was in that person's shoes, what would I be looking for in the CVs? That the language, it's mostly around language and keywords and examples of what you use. So I'd say it's still very relevant, even if you're switching careers. So yeah, education, research. I can't give you more specific because I'm actually not too sure what entertainment would look like, and I'm trying to get through some of these as well. So I'm hoping these are very useful for all of you. Okay, the next one is how to frame a resume when transitioning from other fields to emphasize the domain knowledge. Yeah, okay, so this is quite a recurring topic here. Maybe I should write a post on it sometime. Yeah, how do you frame it when transitioning? I would frame it in as much positivity as possible. So, for example, when someone says that they're leaving XYZ because it's so terrible, that's not a good angle to go on. I think it brings quite a negative energy, I would say, to the whole application. Adding that you are, you're like what skills you, and this is where reading a little bit more research on the non-tech side of data analysis work is probably going to help you quite a lot. Then you can understand, like, for example, I mean, I'll say it again and again, like talking to people or gaining consensus or understanding requirements. These are things that transcend specific fields, and they are where you will have a lot of experience. Oh, sorry, so that question now disappears. I've lost my train of thought a little bit, but yeah, I think it's yeah, I'll try and do a bit more research on what do people do when they're not doing the actual programming work, and see, right, yeah, I've done this in XYZ. Okay. Do I need, or should I shed light on my academic history and achievements that are irrelevant to my job? Yeah, I would say if you've got, generally I wouldn't. I mean, especially at a certain, depends where you are in your career, but yeah, I don't think, like, the point of the CV isn't to show everything you've ever done. It's to show what is it that you've done is relevant. If you happen to be like, you've got a big gap, right? Like there's very little that's actually you can identify as quite relevant, then I would try and add something, you know, just to, I guess, pad it out a little bit so that it doesn't look too sparse. But I would definitely go for less than more, especially as you start going in your career. There's, I mean, okay, I may be much further ahead than some of you, but there's whole chunks of stuff I've just leave off now because it's just not relevant at all. I mean, it's relevant in the sense of it's who you are as a person and it's brought you to where you are and all that, but it's, you know, if the hiring manager can't tell how working in you know, in some other totally unrelated industry 10 years ago helps you now, if you can't make that case, I would rather just leave it off. Next one, how can a candidate stand out? What can they do if they don't have experience, only degrees and certificates? I think look like really carefully at all the work surrounding and all the tasks you do surrounding your research, right? So getting a degree and certificate is not a it's not a trivial matter. I mean, you put a lot of effort into that and you do learn a lot by it. I think one thing, like aspect to one thing to try maybe is, you know, to you it feels like, oh, I don't have any knowledge or experience in how to do data analysis, right? Because I've only done a course, I've only done this. But there's really many things that you do know. And an exercise that you could try is have some hypothetical other person, right? Maybe someone that you know, but who's definitely not equipped to do the work, right? A cousin or something who's never heard of data analysis and doesn't know anything about it, right? Someone that you like, but someone that really has no clue about the role that you're applying for. And just think about all the things that you really do understand. Like you understand basics. You can start with the real basics. There are different types of files. There are different formatting standards for data. You know, when you're copying data from here to there, it can, there's issues with that, right? Visualization, people understand visualize or pick up different things from types of graphs depending on the information. Even if you don't know what the best type of graph is, just that you know that there is a difference is already a skill and knowledge that's so easy to like overlook, right? And if you start thinking, okay, what's all the things in this role that someone totally outside would need to learn even to apply, then I think you will surface for yourself much better actually the vast array of skills that you've developed in getting your degree. Okay, requirements. Sometimes companies try to hire for now and the future to support initiatives in hardware and software. How do we pick the really hot buttons for the hiring entity? If there's a job that you were really interested in and you wanted to figure that out, I've done this before. I really go and research that company a lot, and I see what is it that if they've published anything, any blog posts, news things, reports, anything at all. What is it that they're talking about? You could also, if you do a bit of LinkedIn Googling, let's say it says the job says who you'll be reporting to, like it might say whatever. I would go look for the role. I wouldn't contact the person directly. That's I don't. As a general rule, I wouldn't. But I mean, there's I suppose always kind of exceptions. But I'll see what is it that person's skills and where their abilities lie, and that might give me some. If someone's the head of the department's heavily into certain machine learning techniques or something, that's probably a good indication that that's where they're going to go. That's how I'd pick it.
Okay, and Oscar, let's do one more question, and then I think we should let you go.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, cool. We'll do the next one. Right, so next top one is, how should I go about customizing my CV or resume when I have no experience? Okay, well, I think I answered that type of one already. Hi, does prior experience in a different role matter as a data analyst? Since I have 3 years experience in financial, definitely. I have, despite having all the requirements, my skills don't get shortlisted. Yeah, it's very interesting. People with very high numerical backgrounds often feel like they don't have any experience. So it's amazing. Yeah, financial experience is you understand numbers. So having all the requirements and skills doesn't get shortlisted. I would say probably have another look at whether you're really actually surfacing this in a way that I'd guess you're not. Your CV is the issue. It's not your actual experience. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Oscar. And thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you, especially if you joined us on our live streams. I know we had some technical difficulties to start, but we got them up and running eventually. And I know we still have, gosh, Oscar, we still have like 31 questions. So maybe we can download those and send them over to you if you want to do your own blog post on them or something.
Yeah, and the chat as well would be great.
So for those who are still here with us, next week on April 20th at 11 a.m. Pacific, we do have another webinar or community event called the Behavioral Edge, Level Up Your Data Science Skills with Behavioral Science. And that is with Florent. And Florent, I'm apologizing if I butcher your last name here. I think it's Buisen. He's a behavioral economist with 10 years of experience in business analytics and behavioral science. So it should be really fun, especially if you're, again, just entering data science or work in a behavioral science field like marketing. So, but Oscar, thank you again. And thank you again, everybody, for hanging out with us today. And we hope to see you next week.
Cool. Yeah, thanks.